Okay, so next we've got a short story by Neville Raper called Witness.
She blustered into the kitchen, a china shop bull. Even at this time in the morning she was beautiful. She was a Tasmanian devil of shining hair and perfume, spinning on a cartoon axis. What always hit me first was her smell. Not just the perfume she wore, but her skin and hair, breath and perspiration. I drown in it every time she's near, and I love her for that. Of course I would not dare tell her, and considering what was about to happen in the next 20 minutes, I would never get the chance. She didn't see me. Whether this was intentional or not, I did not know. I was, in this relationship, used to being ignored. This morning I didn't mind, because I was busy enjoying my leisurely breakfast. Laid out before me were sticky sweet cereals, bread and fresh butter. Although there was always a choice, I must admit I do tend to gravitate to the sugary end of the morning's selections. Who doesn't love jam? She seemed lost in her thoughts, and leant over the kettle, grumbling. 36, but she did look much younger. Slender and tall, she dwarfed me. She prepared coffee, 1 cup. I could never manage one myself, just the odd sip. She stared at her mobile, and I noticed that she was chewing her lip nervously. The kettle's steamy siren broke her concentration. I couldn't help but notice that she jumped slightly and trembled as she reached for her cup. She poured in the hot liquid, stirred it violently and raised it to her lips. There, again, I could detect a slight quiver. She was nervous. I knew better than to try to bother her when she was like this, so I carried on with my repast. A loud knock made us both jump. I thought I could see the door shake with the stress of it. She walked to the kitchen door and opened it slightly. The man forced the door open and, using his shoulder, barged his way into the house. Shocked, I was frozen where I was. The man was large, his teeth bared like a rabid dog. He screamed a stream of obscenities, machine-gun menace and staccato spittle. Surprisingly, she didn't seem afraid. In fact, she echoed his anger, shouting furiously about his uninvited intrusion. He didn't appear to listen, ignoring her and walking over to her handbag on the kitchen table. She tried to stop him, but he pushed her roughly to one side. At this point I'd seen enough. I shouted for him to stop and get out. He was so wrapped up in his storm he carried on, not seeming to hear me at all. He pulled out her phone and waved it in her face. Now he was ranting about some messages to his wife. Then it started to become a bit clearer. They'd been having an affair. He'd finished it, and she had decided to contact his wife. What was that saying about a woman scorned? He whirled and launched her phone against the wall. It smashed into the space above me and shattered into 100 pieces. Communication exploded all around me in plastic shards. I saw this all in exquisite slow motion. Luckily no shrapnel connected with me, but, like the coward I am, I stayed rooted to my position. The staccato sound spurred her into action. She span round and grabbed a large, sharp knife from the block next to the kettle. She brought it up in front of her and waved it in the man's face like a talisman warding off an evil spirit. A horrible rictus grin stretched across his face. It seemed to split it in two. There was no humour in this smile, the meaty sneer of the confident carnivore. He took the knife from her in one swift, fluid movement that, to most, would have been impressive. I knew I could move that fast. I just wished at this moment I had the courage. She screamed at him. He maintained that terrible, humourless grin. Her shouts came to an abrupt stop as he plunged the knife into her throat. I saw all this in terrible slow motion. She did more than fall. She seemed to crumple as if the blood kept her rigid. Like a deflated balloon, she sunk to the floor. I could tell she was dead before she embraced the cold tiles. The man, showing no emotion or reaction to his deed, turned and swiftly left the house, leaving as he had entered, slamming the door behind him. I flew over to her side. Blood pooled and congealed around her, its strong, sweet smell mixed with her perfume. I let it wash over me in a tidal wave of an olfactory sea. God help me, I found myself tasting it. I sobbed as I drank. It was probably the shock, but I lost all concept of time. I slept, dreamless sleep. I was awoken abruptly as the kitchen door was kicked in. Thinking that the killer had returned, I retreated to my refuge of the kitchen table. 3 men walked in. 2 in uniform, 1 in a suit. The suited man barked orders.
"Get SOCO here, Wilson!"
The subordinate spoke into his crackling radio. In the gloom they didn't see me. The man in the suit fell to one knee.
"Stabbed to death. No sign of forced entry. She knew her killer."
He looked over to where I was and noticed the smashed phone.
"Should be a SIM card in that. Have it checked for messages."
He motioned to the other uniformed men. At this point I could be silent no more. "I saw it all," I shouted. No response. They didn't even acknowledge me. I'd had enough. I finally plucked up the courage I'd been lacking and decided to approach them. The man in the suit raised his hand and attempted to strike me. Confused, I fell back towards the window.
"Oh, and Wilson, open that window. All we need is that thing laying eggs and maggots all over the place. It'll be contaminating the corpse."